Well, good afternoon and welcome to MedTech Crossroads. Today is Friday, March 26th, our 51st episode. Give or take, it's been a year. We're going to have a good time today talking COVID Connect. We always wonder to ourselves, well, is it over and can we let go of this? Can we get on with just focusing on the community of MedTech? And the answer right now is no. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. Today is our pitch party judging. We have our judges back today for a wonderful time for our 3 startups for the month of March. And after that Q&A and community check-ins, we're looking forward to those as well. But first of all, the COVID metrics. I want to take you to covid.cdc.gov, which is one of our new sources of truth since the COVID tracking project shut down. And this is what we're seeing out of the state of Michigan today for Wednesday, March 17th through Tuesday, March 23rd. Today is the 26th. Lots of red on community transmission. Michigan apparently is transmitting COVID pretty much unrestrained at the moment. Some anecdotes from one of our guests today that we were just hearing that some of that may be the variants. We can't confirm that. But it really seems to be transmitting in the state of Michigan. If we look at some of the curves, this is a death curve over the course of the pandemic for 4 states, Michigan and Texas, Ohio, and Indiana. And if you look over at the right side there where things are generally coming down, a tiny little uptick in the state of Michigan. And then if we go to the same states, but the new cases, you'll see that while the other 3 states are plateauing down at a trough, Michigan is well on a climb again in cases. And having looked elsewhere, I can tell you that's not because people started testing more. The testing is actually down, but the cases are starting to rise. This map is a pretty graphic visual of that from covidactnow.org, where Michigan and some of the eastern seaboard is really lit up, where the rest of the country at the moment kind of moderate to low. So we'll see where this goes. Again, looking at the state of Michigan, daily new cases per 100,000 population. Over the course of the pandemic, you see the fall spike that we all recall. We're well on our way back up that curve right at the moment for daily new cases. Again, not necessarily with increased testing. And if we go forwards, apologies, the infection rate climbing back up to the place where it was in preparation for that fall spike. So really interesting to see those numbers coming back up. I did want to give you this one other graph from COVIDNet, which is a part of the CDC data network there. And this is hospitalizations, laboratory confirmed hospitalizations, COVID-19 hospitalizations by age group. That's a thing we've talked about a lot, but haven't shown a lot of data for. And up until now, at least, where it for the moment is down in terms of hospitalizations, just to look at how this has disproportionately affected those over 65 years old, next up the 50 to 64 year group, then the 18 to 49, which is a very, very large group compared to the 50 to 64-year-old group. And then beneath that, and you can see that fall spike, what it did per 100,000 to the 50-year-old and up population. Really hit hard there. Before we go to our pitch party, I want to talk about vaccine distribution. It's just been interesting to follow that from the New York Times. They have this wonderful chart here. This has jumped by about 3%. That is the darkest areas, representing at least 1 dose, have jumped by 3% since last week. And we're seeing that just continuing to rise. This graph doesn't look a whole lot different than it did last week, going up in roughly a straight line. We're now at 2.51 million average doses per day. This, of course, includes not only the Pfizer and Moderna vaccines, but also the Johnson & Johnson one, which only requires 1 dose. So we continue to see that to climb. It's going to be really interesting in the next couple of weeks where this goes, especially in the state of Michigan. As we all are now intimately familiar, it takes a couple weeks for hospitalizations to show up and a few more for deaths to show up. So we're going to continue to watch this with a great deal of interest. One more thing I want to remind you of, Into Being is looking for a microcontroller firmware developer, an embedded systems developer. If you know anybody who fits this bill, let them know that we're looking and make them come to our website and make contact with us. We would love to talk with them. All right, it's that time again. As you know, we love talking about things like FDA education. We love talking to the community. We love bringing guests on and asking them, hey, what's your passion? What makes you part of the MedTech community, especially in Michigan, but beyond? But then we said, how are we going to involve the startups? Because startups, well, they're embedded in what they're doing and they've got a passion. They're part of the community, but their needs are very different from the service providers and investors and doctors and community members and business development organizations. So we thought a few months ago, we thought, well, let's do a pitch party. Let's talk about pitches. As long as that's what they're good at doing, let's have them come talk about it. So today is the day when, for the month of March, we award $1,000 to one of these startups that we've seen over the last 3 weeks. And we call it a party because, as our friend Walt Young reminded us, pitching and running a business are not the same things. There are pitches that can be great and they'll never amount to anything as business. There are businesses that can be wonderful, but they didn't pitch very well. And one of those, of course, is FedEx and Fred Smith, who didn't do very well at the pitch to his professor, but that professor wishes that he had looked a little deeper onto that one, I think, today. So for the month of April, if you're still interested, and we still got, I believe, one slot for April open, send your pitch deck to pitchparty@medtechcrossroads.org to be eligible for selection. And then we're going to bring those on and do one per week for a 10-minute slot. It's a strict 10 minutes and all the floor to the startup. Let them pitch as you've seen this month on the show. Well, I want to welcome back today our judges, and we're sorry to say that Jim Metzger is out sick today, so we wish him the best. I just want to tell you for a moment what I would be asking him anyways, which is to tell us a little bit about Keystone. Keystone Solutions Group is located on the west side of Michigan, and they are a full-service product development and manufacturing firm that's been around for quite a number of years. Jim could tell us the exact number, but they are a integrated part of the Michigan ecosystem. And we're proud to have Jim as one of our judges, and we hope he feels better. Next up, I want to welcome back, and you can turn your video on, Andy Rader of Evergreen M&A Partners. Andy is the managing partner, one of the managing partners there. How's it going, Andy?
Good, Gene.
It's good to see you.
It's good to be here.
And you guys are back in the office, and I wonder if you could just catch us up on EMA Partners. Some of our audience knows what you guys do, some don't, and I wonder if you'd just catch us up on some of the interesting happenings in your area and make sure that we know what you do.
Sure. Yeah, thanks. We are technically a lower middle market boutique investment bank focused on life sciences, including MedTech. We're based in Denver, Colorado, although we have an office here in Ann Arbor, which is where I'm sitting now, in our Ann Arbor office. We help small companies in life sciences, including MedTech companies, when they reach an inflection point, we help them explore their strategic options and then execute down one or more of the pathways. And those include fundraising, strategic partnerships, development arrangements, out licensing, and outright company sales. So that's what we do. Wander around the industry, pretending to be smart mostly.
We've always appreciated your insights because you're actually down in the question of how can we take an actual company that's going and maybe it hasn't achieved all the things that it was supposed to achieve on paper on the original business plan, but really get in there and say, okay, what value does this have and what can we do with it? And I've always appreciated that, which is just so cool. Wonderful. Well, we're going to bring you back in just a second, Andy. Next up, I want to welcome back. I think my share dropped here, but next up, I want to welcome back Dr. Nikki Kennedy, who's a vascular surgeon, many other things, as well as the founder of Arbor Hive. There's Nikki. How's it going?
Hey, Gene. How are you doing today?
Doing great. It's good to have you back.
Thank you.
And for our audience, tell us again what Arbor Hive does, and if there's any news happening right now, we'd love to know about it.
So as you've probably heard before, Arbor Hive is a nonprofit network that consists of physicians, entrepreneurs, business development, universities, Basically, we put it together because we think that clinicians and innovators need to talk early and often. And that's a hard thing to do. It's hard to get into hospitals and health systems sometimes to get access to the people with clinical experience. What we try to do is make that a little easier for you.
That's wonderful. We're glad to have you back, and glad to see spring out there as well. It's so cool.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to bring you back in just a minute. And next up, I want to welcome Stacy Frankovich, who is the program manager for MedHealth based out of Techtown in Detroit. There's Stacy. How's it going, Stacy?
Good. How are you?
Good. It's good to see you. I know you were having some computer difficulty earlier. It looks like that's resolved itself, so we're glad that that's working. But tell us a bit about MedHealth and Techtown, and if there's any upcoming events, we'd love to hear about them.
Sure thing. Sure thing. So MedHealth is a program at Techtown Detroit. We are a cross-border collaboration, so we work closely with our friends over on the Canadian side. We work with MedTech startups in helping them really navigate the vast landscape of resources there are. So I'll steal a little quote from Paul Reiser, who's my boss, and he talks about being connective tissue across the state. So there are vast resources available to MedTech startups, and we really take a start here approach, and we'll help you find the right one at the right time. We also work to convene and connect and educate innovators and the whole ecosystem on what is available to them, what resources exist, and how to collaborate with one another. And we do that through events and webinars, and we run a summit every year. This year, of course, will be virtual yet again, but just really trying to make the right matches at the right time with the right resources.
That's awesome. We appreciate everything that you guys do. It's good to have you here. Well, let's bring our judges back on. Everyone can turn your video on. We'll stop. Actually, I guess I won't quite stop the share yet because we're going to start talking in just a second here about the companies themselves. But as always, our goal here is to talk about what we like and what we don't like. We can't really directly compare these companies. They're doing different things for different markets. The comparison wouldn't necessarily be fair. But ultimately, what we're going to ask our judges for is who they want to tip their hat to. Which one just impressed you the most for whatever reason? And we will get to that towards the end. But before we go there, our first company, which we had on the show 3 weeks ago, was Safety Sit and Mark Harburg. And there's a picture of their device for helping patients near the edge of the bed. And I think what I'll do here is I'll stop the share so that our judges can go full screen when they're speaking. But I'm wondering who wants to start and tell me what you liked about Safety Sit.
I like the tagline, Safety Sit, we've got your back. I mean, that's a good place to start, right?
That's awesome. Yeah. Very simple idea here, but a way to sit up. Of course, they had pictures of nurses kind of all over a patient trying to hold them up for an activity.
Well, a long time ago, I mean, I had a little bit of personal experience with this. A long time ago, I actually worked on an inpatient unit, kind of as hired muscle. It was in a psychiatric unit. And one of the big issues that nurses had, many of the nurses did have bad backs. This is a long time ago, and things have gotten somewhat better, but it's a real issue, sort of needing to move and manhandle and change position for patients. So I think it's makes a lot of sense to me intuitively.
That's cool. Very cool.
I agree, Andy. I worked with an administrative assistant when I worked for Macomb Community College who was an occupational therapist and was no longer in the field for that specific reason. She had injured herself permanently by lifting a patient. So definitely see the need.
Yeah. And Andy, to just bring things up to date, it's still a huge issue. Trying to lift patients, especially as patient obesity has increased over the decades, has become a huge concern for all kinds of people, nurses, our physical and OT, even our physicians. I know even in our clinic, my two little wafy nurses are supposed to be lifting patients because family expects them to. And it's a huge concern because if those people go out, they're so specialized with their training, they're hard to replace.
That's interesting, Nikki, because it seems like there could be an element there of you're in the moment. It looks like something has to be done, and you try to do it, and then, oops, I just ripped my back out, kind of a thing.
all the time still, all the time. So
Interesting. Well, let's talk for a minute about maybe room for improvement there for safety sit. What sorts of things maybe we're missing? Again, I guess I got to remind the audience here, we don't give any chance for Q&A, and we've done that for a particular reason. We're really asking the question, not which of these is best, because we can't judge that, but rather, how well did this person do at getting all the points of interest into their presentation? Are they answering most of the kinds of questions that should be answered to be able to evaluate this adequately? And that's what we're looking for now. So to our judges, what maybe wasn't there? What question do you wish you could have asked but wasn't contained in the presentation?
I got one. For me, it would have been really helpful, I think, to see how you get the patient into the position, because the risk for the caregiver starts, the minute they have to lean over the bed and start to do something. So I definitely buy the premise that as soon as the patient is in the chair, it becomes a one caregiver operation. You don't need the second person behind to avoid a fall or something. But I would have been interested to know how you actually get manipulate the patient into the chair, and if there's any help, if the device provides any help for that.
Yeah, I would actually echo Andy's sentiment. That's exactly my concern. I actually thought this was a great pitch. All three of them were great, but I didn't see any safety data. And in looking at the device, because we only saw some still images of it, I'm not really sure how you get the patient into it without two people. I mean, you can probably swing the patient's legs around and kind of put it around the patient, but patients sometimes can't even swing their legs around without help and get up. So I still am not quite sure how this is a unique solution for a single person. I would like to see if there are complications with this. And I kind of felt that was not addressed at all. And those are the first questions as a clinician that popped into my mind. I thought the rest of it actually went really well. I think it was a little foggy in terms of their current IP status. I wasn't sure if they have something in progress or if they have a utility patent in place. But and I also was wondering what their current state was with future distributors. It sounds like they had some hospital partners already, but it sounded like they were specific health systems. They didn't have a corporate partner or distribution channel plan. And those would be some other questions. Oh, and how long it lasts, how durable it is. I didn't see any discussion about, will it break? How long until you have to replace it? Those sorts of things.
Well, there's some. I want to go to Stacy for her room for improvement too. But let's unpack just a few of those that you mentioned. So, the question that Andy and Nikki brought up about how do you get here? We accept that once you get here, this is a good thing to have, but how do we get the patient to this position? And have we incurred the risk of self-harm at that point just to get them to that place? That's an interesting one. That really comes into the realm of usability from the perspective of FDA. That's what they're really looking at is the device usable? In terms of what you said, though, Nikki, I think it's a really interesting point we heard about health systems, but not necessarily distribution partners. And I think as we look at startups, this is not a comment about Safety Sit in particular, this is just as we look at startups, maybe 10 years ago, we would get excited if we said, oh, you've got a couple of startup or health systems that are willing to buy your product. That's cool. Andy, I think it was you who once told me, unless you can ramp sales year 1, year 2, year 3 at a pretty high rate, don't even bother, because the acquirer is going to look at that. So it's just an interesting point to bring out, is that maybe the goal needs to be who's going to distribute this, and is there ramp interest there, not just can I sell it to somebody.
Yeah, once you're on the treadmill, you got to run faster and steeper every year. That's true.
That's a point I don't think has quite made it out to the startup world yet. It's fun to watch this over the course of decades and to see that the startup world learns these lessons. And this is one that I'm not quite sure as a startup world we've necessarily learned yet. So I think that's good to get that out there.
Can I throw a twist on it too, onto the point you guys are making about selling and distribution? And this applies to all med tech. It's easy to look, I think, for attributes that the caregivers will like, or that improve patient outcomes. But sadly, you really have to address the question about, well, A lot of people assume that if it can save a hospital system cost, I'd be interested in the other panelists' thoughts on this, but if it can save a health system cost, they will adopt it. We have found in many cases that that's not automatically true. You need a really strong health economics model. If they have to shell money out to buy something, you need a really strong health economics model to drive that. And the caregivers can't necessarily sway that. I see Dr. Kennedy nodding. I mean, do you agree with that? Just the cost saving concept doesn't necessarily drive purchase when it comes to health systems.
Right, especially if they already have a huge CapEx investment in something that's good enough and it's already in place for them. I find that there's a lot of inertia in health systems as well as in other businesses where you can have the top of the line product that's going to revolutionize the world. But if you have something that's good enough for half the price and they already own it, they're probably gonna stick with that.
It's gotta be that sea change. This is great. I want to get Stacy's thoughts here. So what room for improvement?
So I second what Dr. Kennedy and what Andy has said about trying to understand how to get into that position, because I think just even sitting up, and if you're using this for home use, you're not going to have a medical grade bed often, which could aid in the sitting process. So because they brought up the home use in the pitch, I think they have to talk about if this is adaptable to any type of bed. I think that's an area that we need to understand. But one thing that stuck out to me, and Jean, you and I have had these conversations about being too quick to manufacture. And I was a little concerned that they didn't list a distribution partner, only that they had a few health systems interested. And I'd like to know more about that procurement process. Where are they in that procurement process to justify manufacturing at this point? Because we certainly don't want to see anybody with a garage full of product that they haven't been able to sell. We want to make sure that they have a strong distribution channel ready to go and are working on that capacity. All in all, I thought it was a great pitch. I have seen Safety Sit in the past. I can't remember where, but I have seen them. And I think their pitch had improved from my memory of the past. But really that's, if they're going to go into that home use, I think they're going to need to talk a little bit about that adaptability and how it works for that type of use.
Great comments. Okay, that's wonderful. Let's take a look at our next participant here with Safety Sit, and the next was John Wilcox from Diatech Diabetes and the Smart Fusion AI-powered infusion monitoring software. So again, what did you like about it? What was positive here?
I thought this was a fantastic pitch, well organized, really tied his personal story into the necessity. I had no idea that 80% failure rate, none whatsoever. That is shocking to me. But I just thought a very, very well-rounded, well-done pitch.
Yeah, I would echo Stacy's sentiments. There were, I mean, they hit almost all the marks. It was very professional. I liked it. They had good achievable milestones. They have some great partners in the health area, the American Diabetic Association, Juvenile Diabetes Association. I saw Stanford and one of the Texas universities listed in there. What I didn't see though was support from current manufacturers. I'm not sure again if they have that interest or they just weren't able to mention at that time. What I see lots of times with the electronic medical record, you know, Epic, Cerner, all of those, there's some great third-party developers, but they don't have an inroad with these behemoths of the industry. And as a result, they are never going to be able to integrate fully with that huge industry partner. So they can design the coolest thing ever, but if it's not going to work on that system platform that everyone has, it's not going to go anywhere. And if they have had these industry conversations, that's great. I think they're at the point they absolutely should, because if they're going to put this into some pump that they don't own, they have to make sure that the pump manufacturer is willing to work with them for this and it'll be compatible. And they also need to make sure that the current pump manufacturers aren't already developing something like this in their pipeline. Again, we see that with the EMR companies. They are not interested in the third-party developer because they already are working on it internally. And you know, for better or for worse, you have to be a little careful when you share that kind of killer app with a big industry partner. So it may not be something that John was able to comment on, but that would be a huge concern for me with them. But I agree with Stacy. It was otherwise an almost flawless pitch. It looked great.
Yeah, I agree with both of the other panelists. I thought it was a great pitch. I think it's a good unmet need, sort of that key first step, right? Are you solving a problem for somebody? And I think for patients, it would matter. I think for the equipment manufacturers, it could matter. But to echo Dr. Kennedy's point, you either need their buy-in or you need to show that you're truly agnostic. And toward that end, the one thing I would have loved to have seen in the pitch is more about how it actually works. You know, if it's patient-based, I assume it's not physiologically tracking some elements that show that suddenly the pump isn't working. I assume it's associated with the equipment itself. But I would have liked to have known more on a technical level, even if it was fairly rudimentary, sort of how it interacted with the patient and the pump to deliver them the answer.
And he did mention in the pitch that it could provide the clinician updates for them to understand any issues that you're facing. So I wondered with that, you know, with that personal patient information, how that would interact with the physician records. Does it interact with Epic? Does it, you know, so I think I was a little confused there on how the data was going to be transferred into the patient record for the clinician to review. And then what specific data for that matter?
Yeah, no, actually, Stacy, you bring up a great point, because the one thing I hear over and over again is people will say, I have this great app, I have this great system, it has its own dashboard. And clinicians say, I don't want to look at another dashboard.
Right.
I want it to be in one dashboard. And if you aren't playing ball with your EMR companies and you have to do an external site, it gets really challenging to really get any traction in the field.
Good point.
Yeah.
Strikes
So
me that this is, oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, if he had kind of at least addressed those concerns, I would feel a little bit more, that his pitch was more complete. But those are huge questions that I know he doesn't have the chance to answer for us today, but for sure, those are some red flags for me.
And I have one more, and this is just from sort of an investor point of view, and it has to do with the FDA. I mean, the thing about, you know, you have to walk that line. What are you really monitoring? What results are you delivering? If you're delivering information to a caregiver to help make a decision for a patient, that is sort of one level. But if you're actually tracking a patient and you are saying, I can keep something bad from happening to the patient, the FDA, you know, may take a much sterner, stricter, and legitimately so approach to the, you know, to an approval. So I'd be interested to know, you know, it goes back a little bit to what is the app actually tracking, what information is it actually delivering, but I'd be interested to know that kind of stuff, to know what the FDA pathway and probability of success really would be. If to Nikki's point a little while ago, if you're tied in with the manufacturer, presumably that all gets somewhat easier. But if you're going to do it as a platform agnostic app, I think you might have some additional challenges you might want to address right up front with people in an investment, you know, sort of presentation.
Those are really interesting points, Andy. And I think one of the things that we see from startups all the time, so again, not commenting specifically on this one, is they'll come in to us and they'll say, here's what we're going to do, and it's going to revolutionize the market. And then we have to sit them down and say, no, what is your intended use? What are you actually going to put on the labeling that you're claiming that you do? And any number of companies, especially ones that are doing diagnostics, like you said, will find themselves wanting to claim more than FDA is likely to give them a pass on. So that's straight up. The other part of that is compatibility that you guys mentioned. The compatibility with other systems, that's partly a business concern, but then it's also a concern of, can you get clearance for it? Because if you don't actually have access to that other system, but you somehow need to play with it, how do you assure safety and efficacy of that interface? And that can be very hard to do in a regulatory context. So just a little bit more unpacking of that you guys already brought up in this specific instance. I think we switched somewhere there from positives to room for improvement, but let's go around the table again and make sure that we caught either the positives or the rooms for improvement.
Well, I think that, again, there was not, other than what we talked about, not a lot of room for improvement. They had a very clear problem statement. They discussed their IP and their early data. I thought the early data demonstration was really great. It sounds like, oh, I'm sorry, where was I again? It sounds like the regulatory path was really, really clearly defined, and they're kind of working on it. And again, I like their milestones. I thought they were very clearly defined. They talked about the partners that they have to help them achieve all of that. I mean, it seems like they have a pretty reasonable plan in place, provided they can work through these issues we just talked about. They should actually be in really good shape.
I
I don't
agree.
have anything else to add. Oh, sorry, Andy.
Yeah, no, I did the same thing. I don't have anything to add. I agree with all of that. I mean, it's easy. We can list out the positives, but they're, it was a very solid presentation.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's go on to the next one. Our next one, I'm gonna do a screen share here again, was Anthony Esplin from Sleep Easy Oxygen Pillow. And there's a picture of one of their prototypes along with a kid sleeping there. So with that up on the screen there, and I'll remove it just a second so we can go back to full screen with the judges. What was the positives and what were the negatives? What do we like about this?
So I kind of loved this pitch, actually. And I have to tell you, it was kind of a dark horse for me, because I kind of saw this and I went, well, does it really work? But this group of, it sounds like young entrepreneurs, it sounded like they were in school or just finishing school. They came up with I thought, a really solid pitch for what they've accomplished so far. The only negative I will interject in this is it is early for them. And I think that is probably the big detriment. But that, again, just takes a little time to vet out, see which way it's going to go. But they had a very clear problem statement. Again, IP and early data was surprisingly fleshed out. Again, I wasn't quite sure if their FDA clearance was really set in stone or if they had a good idea. It sounds like they had a few different ways they could go with that. Great milestones, especially for a group that is early and maybe not quite as experienced. Maybe this is the first time through, but I thought that what they set was very realistic over a reasonable time frame. And what I loved was that they have a partner in the DME field who's interested, and they've already started to develop those relationships. They're okay to talk about it. It sounds like they might actually have somebody who could give them a boost if they can work through some of their other early inventor issues.
Yeah, I agree with all of that. I really like this pitch, and I actually approached it with maybe my dubious hat on too, because you see a lot of almost devices that kind of do something, and I think this one, in my mind, before I started the video, ran that risk, but that wasn't the case. I actually really like it, and I think for people that are on oxygen continuously for whatever reason, whether it's just an extended period or the rest of their lives, anything you can do to make something like sleep more comfortable by taking one piece of equipment off of their body it's just got a head start in my mind. So I liked it. I have some worries about proving oxygen delivery. I mean, I'm not sure, there might be some thoughts about what kind of patients can use it. You might have to be careful about, having your subgroup be right. I'm not sure you really want truly oxygen dependent people. I don't know what the FDA would think about that, but short of that, I think it's a really great idea to give people an easier way to sleep who need to have some oxygen assist.
I have very little to add. You two have beat me to the punch. I will say I did really like this pitch. I'm eager to see what our next generation of entrepreneurs are bringing to the table. And so this was brand new to me. I have never seen any of these people before come through with this. So thoroughly enjoyed that. I thought tying it to a personal story again was important for the pitch. I will say relax a little. If there's any critique, relax. And I know they're young. I know this is early, and I know they're not used to pitching, and it's scary and it's challenging. But I would say relax. Have a little bit more fun in the pitch, although it's a very serious topic. I did make a comment about, I would have liked to have seen a little bit more about how the technology works. I understand the airflow, the air circulation, but I wasn't really 100% sure how that how it all worked, I guess. And one thing I thought of, and please somebody correct me because I could be way off base here, but perhaps bringing in a little advice or counsel from those that are working in the sleep apnea field, because they're working on these devices that are pushing oxygen into individuals already. And maybe there could be some synergies there. Could be completely off base, but I thought, maybe there would be an opportunity to talk with somebody in that capacity. But really, I was surprised. I got to the end of it. At first, I thought, well, he's a little uncomfortable and a little shaky. And by the time I got to the end of it, I was like, yeah, this is good. This is good. They did a great job. So I look forward to seeing where they can go with this.
That's awesome. Those are great comments. Again, not a comment about the specific company, but a topic that you brought up, and happening to know this comes out of Notre Dame and their Idea Center and their STEAM program. One of the things that we always like to do is just boost programs that are doing good stuff, like our friends at MedHealth and TechTown and Spectrum and FFMI and the University of Michigan and Tech Transfer and MSU and just all over the place. People are doing great stuff. One of the things that impressed me about what they're doing down at Notre Dame is they really quickly throw business students onto their early stage ideas, and they say, go find me if there's a market for this. And I don't see that happening in that way many other places. So I think we could all take a play out of that book down at Notre Dame. So if you don't know what's going on down there, go check it out. It's a great group of people down there.
Very smart.
So with that little community boost, we're getting really, really close to the hard part, judges. This is where it gets fun. And we don't have Jim here this week to sort of be a tiebreaker, because usually we got 4. So even if 3 of you go 1 each, then there's a 4th to break the tie. We don't have that. So if you've all picked different ones, we're going to have to get really creative here, but maybe we won't have that happen. So, maybe we'll get the audience involved in this one if it goes that way. Maybe we'll have them break the tie, but this is uncharted territory for MedTech Crossroads and the pitch party, and you're watching it live. Thank you for being here. So let's do what we always do, and we'll go around and we will see which way the hat tip goes. I do want to remind the audience and the judges, this isn't winners and losers. We've heard some really cool stuff about a bunch of startups, some great pitches, some weaknesses that we identified as trends where this generation of startups should really be thinking, hey, we can make this better. Some surprises, some dark horses in the race that maybe were a lot stronger than we thought. So the hat tip here isn't a winners and losers. It's really just what did you like? Who do you want to tip your hat to that you think deserves a nod today? And for Into Being to send $1,000 to. Again, Into Being won't participate in the judging, but we will send $1,000 to the winner today. And let's start with. Let's see. I'm trying to think of who was our last one last time. It was Nikki last time. So I think this time we're going to end with Andy, and we're going to ask Stacy first. We're going to put Nikki right in the middle.
All right. I have to say all 3 of them were excellent. All 3 of them are going to continue their path and do well, I think. I got to go with our next gen innovators, and I'm going to tip my hat to our Sleep Easy team.
All right, 1 vote for Sleep Easy. All right, thank you, Stacy. We're going to go to Nikki next.
I feel like I'm Jan Brady, right in the middle.
Jan.
There we go.
What did we learn from Zoom this year? Pretty much the Brady Bunch was right. Okay.
So I agree with Stacy. This was a tough one this week because all 3 of these pitches were really, really excellent. Nothing is ever perfect, but I had to work really hard to figure out where there might be some chinks in the armor. I saw kudos to all 3 presenters. They really did a great job, and I expect to see great things from all of them. I'm throwing my hat tip with Stacy and our last presenter, because again, young people, maybe a little fresh in the field, they really brought their A game for this, and I'd love to see where they go next.
Wow. Okay. Wow, we're interested to hear from Andy. Is he gonna follow suit here, or is there a point you want to make here?
Well, I'll follow suit by saying that I agree. All three were great this week. It's a good group. I think they'll all move forward. They all have compelling reasons, and all the presentations were good too. Sorry. That having been said, I'm going with Sleep Easy. I'm tipping my hat to the pillow. I agree, and that's just sort of a gut level response. Honestly, I think it's the people doing it, and the people doing it, how they talked about it, and just kind of how it resonated with me. So Sleep Easy.
Wow, 3 for Sleep Easy. So congratulations, Anthony, and the Sleep Easy team down there. We will be working with you to send you a $1,000 check. And congratulations again. And thank you to our judges. Unanimous this time. Wasn't unanimous last time. We had a bunch of fun stuff happening there. But thank you to all the participants and all of our judges. We're very, very excited by this. And we're planning to do it again next month. We'll look forward to that. Any last words from our judges before we sign off this portion of the show?
Jean, I still think you guys are doing a great job with the pitch party. I love the overall theme to it. And I love the fact that you're finding some great startups for us to really kind of have to gnash our teeth over. This is not easy.
Well, they're finding us, but I also have to say, and then you were going to say something, Andy. We've gotten a lot of feedback that the judging on this has been really, really educational. That we sort of set a goal to say, let's not turn this into the normal pitch competition. And you guys have risen to the occasion and actually educated, which is exactly what we wanted. So thank you to each of you, and to Jim, who was here last time. Andy, you were going to say.
I was just going to say the same thing. I was dittoing. I love what you guys do at Into Being generally, and I think the fact that you started this a year ago, doing these Friday afternoon sessions, is great. And I really like the format for how you're bringing specific business ideas in and having people sort of talk it through and do the goods and bads on it. I think it's a really supportive and positive way to approach it.
Couldn't do without you.
Yeah, Jean, I ditto. Your passion though for the entrepreneurial community is such an asset to Michigan and the whole region. And I thank you for just letting me be a piece of this. I love these pitch parties. It's sharpening my own skills that I think have been lacking a little bit lately. And being able to see these pitches and work with these wonderful judges and you has really just been so much fun. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Stacy. You know where we get the energy from? We just find really cool people who have really cool things to say, like you guys, and then we would just sit in a room with them, and it just energizes me. So that's my dirty little secret, is I just suck the energy off of you guys. Thank you all for being here, and we'll let our judges go. Thank you guys so much. Congratulations to Sleep Easy. Anthony will be in contact afterwards. And as we move on from this segment, I think we're nearly at the end of the show, a little bit early today, but I'm going to give a little bit of extra time in case anyone has anything that they'd like to share. We did have this one thing from our friend Olaf, who is on the show again today, a link from Medium about how growth benchmarking for startups works out. I will just share that screen on that since Olaf shared it with us. It is a... if we can get this to come up, cool article about, this goes back to the question that Andy and I had been talking about how you know whether you can ramp a startup and whether somebody is willing to pay for it. But this article on Medium goes into depth on that. And the article is Revenue Growth Benchmarking for Startups. So Olaf, thank you for sharing that. Let's look around at our attendees and see if anyone wants to raise their hand, if they have any events to announce, any initiatives to announce that you have happening with your company or your entity, something you think the community should know about. Maybe you just want to tell us about your vacation plans, but any of the above would be just fine. And we'll give it about another 30 seconds for that before we close out for the day. I want to tell you also that Jen Baird is going to be on the show next week. She's going to be telling us about Fifth Eye's recent de novo granting, which is so exciting. We're so happy for her and the Fifth Eye team. and we'll be talking with them next week. While not seeing any comments, I want to thank you for being here with us on the 51st episode of MedTech Crossroads. Hope you have a great time. It's a beautiful spring out there. Go out there, be wonderful to each other, and we will talk to you next week. Thanks for being here.